Hey.
There's been a whole lot of buzz surrounding the Portland Trail Blazers during this offseason. It all kicked off during around the time of Team USA when they were playing their scrimmages, when there were a whole lot of rumors coming out that Damian Lillard was requesting a trade from Portland. This news eventually rose up the ladder all the way up to Damian Lillard himself when he had to hold a press conference where he spoke on the rumors, said he is yet to demand a trade from Portland, but he will in the future if they don't make any moves to help them win now. And since that point, the Blazers have done an absolutely just rock solid, amazing job. They've added Tony Snell, Ben McLemore, Cody Zeller, a whole bunch of great players that are going to skyrocket the Blazers to the top of the Western Conference. Exactly what Damian Lillard asked for. Now, all jokes aside, Tony Snell and Ben McLemore, they're great bench additions for this team, and the bench has definitely struggled in the past, so to get two veterans who can shoot the ball pretty well and also just play some solid team defense, those are definitely great additions to, again, a bench that has had its issues in the past being able to keep up and letting these starters down time and time again. I even especially like the Cody Zeller move because they've yet to had a good, solid, consistent backup big for Jusuf Nurkic and all of their time being a competing team. You know, they've bounced around through Hassan Whiteside, Enes Kanter, and just none of those guys were ever quite good enough to be the anchor that Nurkic is for the starting unit. So they bring on Cody Zeller, who, he's a starter caliber center for some teams, and overall he'll just be a good addition to the bench unit. He can play make, he can score the ball a little, he can defend, he does a little bit of everything. Not to mention, they also did extend Norman Powell, who in his 27 games for Portland after the trade deadline was a very good third scoring option and capable defender, and certainly was an upgrade over Gary Trent Jr., ultimately saying that that trade was pretty good for Portland as well. Still though, this isn't exactly the type of offseason you want to have after your franchise player calls out your front office for not making good enough moves or helping the team progress further in their quest for a championship. These mid-level additions, the Snells, the Zellers, the McLemores, you want something big if you're going to keep your franchise player around and get him to stay with the roster. But then this morning, I wake up to this breaking news that there is a three-way trade happening in the NBA. It was awkwardly headlined by the fact that the Cavs got Lauri Markkanen in this sign-and-trade three-team deal because it was actually the Blazers who were quite clearly the winners of this trade, and yet it was not being marketed at all like that. Especially given the Blazers' lack of winning any offseason moves to this point so far. Anyway, the full trade details go as follows. It was a three-team trade, again, between the Bulls, the Cavs, and the Blazers. Cleveland ended up with Lauri Markkanen. Chicago ended up with Derrick Jones Jr. and a few picks. And then Portland ended up with Larry Nance Jr. And with the trade finalized, there's a pretty clear hierarchy to which teams benefited the most from this deal. At least that's what it seemed like to me. So starting at the bottom, the Cleveland Cavaliers, I'm not quite sure what they were doing by making this trade. Not only is a 4-year contract for $17 million a year on average just way too much for what Lauri Markkanen has shown so far in his career, because seriously, who were they in a bidding war against for Lauri Markkanen? But you make this sign and trade for him, you signed him to 4 full years, just a few weeks removed from signing your starting center Jarrett Allen to a 5-year, $100 million deal. Throw in the fact that you also just drafted the best center in the most recent draft class in Evan Mobley. Not to mention, you're still paying Kevin Love $30 million plus a year for the next 2 seasons unless they're going to find some sort of way to dump his contract off somewhere. All of a sudden, there's just way too much capital being invested into this Cleveland front court and just not enough minutes to quite go around to make the contracts worthwhile. Especially when you have a young backcourt with Darius Garland and Colin Sexton who are yet to make their second contract yet and are going to be demanding a whole lot of money because they themselves are also really good players. So I hope Markkanen bounces back. We all know that he had a really struggling time in Chicago to start his career, but at the same time, I'm just not quite sure what Cleveland's direction is right now with their franchise because they've garnered a whole bunch of good young talent and they've already went off and paid a lot of them, and I'm just not quite sure if they've paid the right guys so far. Anyway, moving on to the Chicago Bulls, they did a very solid job in this trade. Because not only did they end up getting something back for Lauri Markkanen after it seemed like a foregone conclusion that he was gone from this team no matter what, but they actually got a piece that will help them right away from day one. And I know Derrick Jones Jr. has bounced around on many teams to start his career so far, and that was for many reasons, but I still think he adds value to teams, whichever team that he finds himself on. He's a solid defender, can defend more than one position, and at the end of it all is just one of the most athletic guys in the entire NBA. I know we've all seen him make some crazy highlight plays with dunks, being in the dunk contest. He's had a few blocks, I think, but overall, again, he's just an uber athletic guy. At the very least, he can eat minutes at the wing position for the Chicago Bulls, which is something that was missing from their current roster. In fact, if you go back and watch my recent video that I just made about the Chicago Bulls, you'll find that I pointed this exact same thing out, because as of now they have DeRozan, Patrick Williams, and then not a whole lot at that wing position. So they need to go and get a veteran who could preferably play some defense for them. And although Derrick Jones Jr. might not be the best at doing that, he's suitable for what the Chicago Bulls need right now. Plus, we now have the chance to see some really exciting things happen between Lonzo and Derrick Jones Jr. on the fast break, and it might be the closest thing we can get to that Lonzo-Zion connection that was so rudely interrupted by the fact that the Pelicans front office is bad at their jobs. But anyway, let's move on to why this is a great move for the Portland Trail Blazers. I've already talked about how their offseason has been a pretty big disappointment so far, but Larry Nance could single-handedly flip that entire agenda on its head. One consistent thing that has been very obvious about recent Portland Trail Blazers teams is that they've lacked a lot of defensive talent, especially when they have a backcourt with Dame and CJ. But since entering the mix as a consistent playoff team, they've worked hard to build on that back line to help support their very, very good offensive backcourt. It started off with adding Jusuf Nurkic, way back. Then when the Houston Rockets were having their big fire sale, they were able to snag Robert Covington out of that. And now they had Larry Nance, who was very easily on his way to an all-defensive team selection this past season before hurting his wrist, which limited him to only playing 35 total games. Now, I doubt they run this lineup often because it would mean that Norman Powell would be sitting on the bench, but a squad of Dame, CJ, Covington, Nance, and Nurkic would be an absolute menace to opposing teams. Yeah, you could get by Dame and CJ pretty easily, but then scoring at the rim is going to be practically impossible, which is all that length and size, and Covington, Nance, and Nurkic just meeting at the rim. It will be tough for anyone to score in the paint. And then even on the offensive side of the ball, they wouldn't be too terrible. Because we've seen in the past that Dame and CJ could easily handle an offense between just the two of them, but throw in the fact that they'll have outlets in Covington and Nance to shoot the ball, because Nance, if you didn't know, was a above 35% three-point shooter for the past 2 seasons, which has been a great improvement for him. But then you have Nurkic just setting picks for everyone around the perimeter, and things can get pretty hectic when you have to deal with 2 great scorers in Dame and CJ, and then 2 guys who can knock down open threes. But even with the projection of a good top 6 players on this roster, the bench still has a lot of holes to fill and work to do if this Portland team does want to be a true contender for this next season. And even though the front office could definitely chalk up this trade as a huge win in both their agendas to pursue a championship and to keep Damian Lillard in town, they should not stop here. They still have a ton of work to do to fill out this roster and just make it good. And if I were them, I'd be pushing hard to try and get something done this year as well, because I've been saying it in a lot of recent videos, but a lot of the top teams in the West have long-term injuries to take care of. That is essentially opening up the conference to potentially some new finalists in the conference and some new potential champions. So as of now, I'm still not counting on Portland to be there at the end, just because they've disappointed us too much in the past to put enough stock in them to feel good about them. But who knows? They have a lot of players with chips on their shoulders now. They have the new head coach who will not be named. Maybe the front office can make another solid move or two, and then who knows, maybe a few branches finally fall in Portland's direction. At the end of the day, Damian Lillard has backpacked this team to a conference finals before. Dame could do a similar thing again and get them to the conference finals, and then from there, he could even carry them to the NBA finals. I wouldn't at all be surprised if that were a route that would happen. But again, with the current state of the roster and just how they're looking compared to the rest of the league, I still think more moves have to be made for the Portland Trail Blazers to still be taken seriously as legit contenders in the NBA today. And if you've made it to this point in the video, then congratulations, you're a real one. Now, if you enjoyed this video, maybe think about hitting the subscribe button. It should be somewhere in this general direction. Or if you're not sure yet, maybe check out another video which should be in this general direction. Either way, thank you for watching.